Namaskar and Jai Hind. Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You. Today, my guest is Professor Mukesh Sud, I call him Mickey because I've known him for many, many years. Otherwise, he goes by the name of Professor Mukesh Sud. Professor Sud needs no introduction. He is an IIT Delhi graduate and then a fellow of IIM Ahmedabad, and then went on to do many things, which he will talk about it. And he has kind of given me a directive not to give him a lengthy introduction, which I think I appreciate. Having known you Mickey, for so many years, first things first, you are a person whose family background is you're an entrepreneur. You are a business family. And then you moved away from the business and moved into academia. Now tell us a little story about yourself, how all this happened, how did family react to it, how did they take to it, and what led to this?
Okay, thanks, Shesh. Lovely talking to you, and happy to engage with all these topics that you have in mind. I come from a semi-business family, really. Dad was in service, working with the company called Shell, Bharat Petroleum. And he did start a business late in his career, which I joined. And then, of course, got on my own and got into engineering businesses. I ran them for about 15 years, and I enjoyed my initial 10 years. It was fun. It was a challenge. And to take you back, when I graduated from the IIT in the early 80s, job opportunities were very few. So you really had to venture into something on your own, which is why I got into business. The other reason was that I was keen on doing an MBA, and most good universities in the US wanted work experience. So I figured, let me go to Bangalore, where my parents were, join Dad's business for a year or two, see what the lay of the land was, and then probably go and do an MBA. This is a time when I would say 30-40% of the batch used to migrate abroad. They would go to Europe, they would go to the US. So it is a quasi-business family, but leaving a business after running it for 15 years was a challenge. I was fortunate, my wife stepped in. I had got admission to IIM Bangalore. I'm correcting you there. I'm a fellow of IIM Bangalore, not IIM Ahmedabad. And
my apologies.
And I was keen to do a PhD. I was keen to become an academic because I enjoyed teaching. And my little bit of interaction with academia showed me that if you want to be considered or taken seriously in academia, you need a PhD. So I then gradually exited the business. My wife managed it for a few years, and then sold it. And I completed a PhD over 5 years. In those days, it was called an FPM, a fellow program. And then had a brand new PhD and decided to become an academic. So that's the initial part of my story.
Right. So I still remember when first time you broke this news to the friends and meeting you at a common friend's house at a dinner when you made a mention and how everybody went after you, and I'll not get into the details of what the jokes were all about, but obviously there was a lot of leg pulling which happened, and I think it was to your wonderful wife, Neera. She was so patient and stood there behind you like a rock, backing you with every decision you are making. And then years of living in US.
Yeah, so the US came much later when I picked up my first job, but the IIM was a fun experience. I mean, initially the students didn't believe that I was a student along with them. They thought I was a mole from the faculty to come and listen in on their conversations. And, I joined the IIM when I was running my own business. So I felt that I'll manage the IIM, I'll manage my PhD and it'll all happen very smoothly. Well, within a month of joining the IIM, I had a test, an exam, where I scored 4 marks on 30. And I realized that I'm on the verge of being thrown out. So I remember going and meeting the operations, the professor, and talking to him, and he was younger than me. And he looks at my paper very carefully and says, even these 4 points that you've got on 30 are not really deserved, but you wrote so much that we gave you these points. So that was the first wake-up call that I had to get serious and get out of the business, live on campus in shared accommodation. And you know what living in hostels and dormitories is like. So a shared bathroom, and you initially share a room too. And that's how the journey started. But once you put your mind on something and you don't have any, no diversions, you can make it work.
Right.
So I was getting back into studying after close to maybe 18 or 20 years of running businesses and managing people.
Right.
And I didn't even know how to type in those days. And PowerPoint was all I knew. But then you pick up the skills once you're with younger people. And one thing I've noticed is that with younger people, if you ask for help, they are very willing to give it to you.
Right.
Because there's an indirect communication going on with younger people that, look, guys, you know something I don't. So can you help me out?
Right.
And they are very forthcoming with their help. They are
Right.
they turn around and give you as much as they can.
Professor Sud, you make a very interesting point, and I have to ask you and a little more to elaborate on it. When you say you got 4 on 30, you did not know how to type, and you were reaching out for people to help. And you were coming from a successful business, what you had done for 15 years.
Yeah.
And here you were. Now, tell me one thing. What were the unlearnings you went through? We all focus, there's enormous emphasis on learning, which we put in our whole system here. But obviously here you were taking on a new avatar after having put 15, 18 years of work experience behind you. What were the unlearnings you're focusing on? What was the biggest challenge you faced? How to let go of your past and adopt to this new student life?
Okay, so the first thing is that when you run a business, you manage people. You manage your clients, you manage finances. And you are the big picture person. So you got people, you need to motivate them. You need to make sure that they are doing what they are supposed to. Once you're a student, again, it's all around you. So you have to, to cut to the chase, you have to put in those hours. You have to focus on the topic that you need to study and understand. You have to interact with some colleagues, some other students, but that was the easy part because I very diligently looked through the yearbook to find out who were the graduates from IIT Delhi. And then I went up to them and said, look, please guys, can I be in your group? Because most work in the MBA level, and I had to do an MBA before the Ph.D. The first year is in common with the MBA students.
Right.
So I went and approached them and said, look, guys, this is my problem. And can you help me? Can I be in your group? And they were quite willing. They were quite open to the idea. And I joined their group. And then it became, and once they know you are sincere, that you're putting in the effort and you want to do something. There were a lot of jokes behind my back. I mean, when the MBA students graduated, they all introduced me to their parents. And it was very funny because they were telling their dads, and look, why can't you do this kind of brave acts? And I said, look, it's not brave at all. It was pretty foolish at that time. But once you are there, you learn how to swim. None of us is going to sink. So you struggle and you come out on top of it.
Right. So between then and now, fast forward 20 years later, here in this country, which was very different way back in 80s and 90s, India was a very different place. There were a lot of things which were still taking shape and they had not even restarted. A lot of people were thinking, there are a lot of dreams floating around. And here, this is the country thriving. What do you think has been the entrepreneurial journey of this country? How has this country evolved? What is when you sit there and you teach your students, when you sit there, what do you see about this country? What do you make of this country?
So I think it's a totally different terrain from what we had or I had when in the early or mid 80s, where you typically go to a bank, you would write a project report, and the banker would then lend you X amount of money, and you would then make monthly EMIs, and that's the way businesses were run. I remember going to a bank and writing a 50-page business plan. And the bank looked at it and then said, no, this is not the way we want it. So I said, what do I do? So the bank had a consultant who then invented figures to support the end objective of getting a loan. So that was the way we went about starting our businesses. Today, for example, they don't do it at all. They write what is called, they do a lean startup. They write a business model canvas, which is one piece of paper with 9 boxes, and they lay out their journey. Secondly, very few of them are taking loans. They are taking in equity. They are going to angels. They are going to VCs. The other big thing is that in our day and age, cash was king. Today, many of these businesses make losses for many, many years before they finally make a profit.
But how do you relate to that? You, as a professor who has the connect with who's seen the past, who's connected to here where it is, you're going to the class. where people are putting in new project reports and say, listen, I will burn cash for a few years before and it's become a big valuation game. How do you see this? What is, how within you, what do you feel about this?
So two aspects here, Shesh. One is that earlier you had a very clear vision. This was the plan that you had. This is where you wanted to get. Today, a lot of these companies pivot. So they come out with what they call a minimum viable product, an MVP. They take it to the market and then they get customer feedback. And they start then changing the direction in which they are going. Earlier, the plans were cast in stone. Today, they're not. So that's the first major difference. The other is that even if they are losing money, Shesh, at the end of the day, and I give Amazon as a classic example, they lost money for decades, but they had a way of turning profitable and turning profitable hugely.
And how?
So it's a question, if you have enough runway, you have enough people funding you, and they share your vision, ultimately you will be profitable. You may first have to pick up clientele, you may have to pick up the clicks online, you may have to pick up market share, and you're losing money doing all this. But at the end of the day, you are going to be profitable. I mean, all the unicorns today, obviously somebody sees value in them. It's not, no one just invests money without seeing a possible return, and VCs need a return within a few years. They're not long-term with you.
Right. So, Professor, you recently co-authored a book, and I got hold myself a copy here. Leapfrog 6 Practices to Thrive at Work.
Yeah.
Now, what I also hear from the grapevine is that this book has been selling like a hotcake in the market, and there is going for reprint. Now, tell me, what prompted you to write this?
Okay.
Number one. Number two, what is the big message which you think are the key takeaways which you think if you were to put it up there, what is it you will put it up which will tell our viewers and the people who get hold of this book should be looking out in this book for?
So, Shesh, 2 things that I have followed very actively in life, and I believe our people should do it to thrive today, given what we call the VUCA world, which is volatile, complex, uncertain, ambiguous, is that you have to keep reinventing yourself. You can't have one career and, like maybe our parents had, join a company, work with them for 30 years and retire. Today, everything has changed. So the first thing that students, I urge students to do is to try these small experiments, things that interest them. You don't take big bets, you don't bet the company bets, but you try small things that are interesting to you. I started my journey as an entrepreneur, and then I wanted to become an academic. So I first started teaching, and I was invited as a guest speaker, as a guest lecturer. I then taught a course, and I was convinced that this is what I want to do. Now, then I went in for a PhD. So the PhD was not just off the cuff. 10, 15 years of being an academic, one of the jobs of an academic is to publish high quality research. So we spent 2 or 3 years writing a paper, and it gets published in a journal, and typically 7 or 8 people read it, of which most of them are our own PhD students. So you have all that effort you have put in, which is going to a very small minority of people. The paper may get cited, other people may read it, but it's not really widely used or widely quoted or widely talked about by everyone. So there's so much of gyan lying behind in academia. It's not my gyan, it's gyan that is all there in research papers. So all we have done, or I have done with the book, with my co-author who's from Ashoka University, is pick up those gems and bring them out for the world to see and read and talk about. So that's all we have done, really. It's nothing original. It's just putting simple, easy to understand practices, as we call them, out there for the world to read about. And one big clientele for the book are our students who are sitting for placements, who are early career professionals. And the book is for everyone who wants to reinvent himself or herself and change the path of their journey, like I did.
So this book is for all those who want to be, who want to take on a job and to stay relevant to the changing times. So how to stay relevant into the changing times and to the current times wherever you belong. Now, I have to ask you this question, and as a professor, and we have talked about this at various occasions when we have met, and amongst our friends we've spoken about it. Many of us pick up a habit and a pattern, and we build on it, and that becomes our USP. Today, and in those days, it used to be that, you had a habit and you picked up a style of operating and it lasted with you 15, 20, 30 years. That's how our parents' life went by. Now, the life cycle of anything and everything has just got reduced to 2 years, 3 years, and sometimes even lesser than that. If you are, in the technology space, the changes are even more faster. In the non-technology space, one could last for a little longer than that. Now, how does one stay relevant in this? Because just when you think, I want to do this, it's changed.
So I would qualify that by saying that you need not try and stay relevant only. You need to thrive, which is what the book is about, which is one stage above being relevant. And we've identified 6 such practices that help you thrive in today's VUCA world, as we call it. And I don't want to give too much away, and I would urge you to buy the book or borrow it and read it. But we talk of things like intellectual humility, the ability to know what you don't know, and have a big ego and a small ego at the same time. So we've gone into this in detail, and today companies like Google, companies like IDEO, which employ a large number of people, young, smart people, want people who are knowledgeable, who are experts in their domain, but they are willing to weigh that expertise lightly and learn from people from different domains. So we have 6 such practices we talk about. We talk of being able to think entrepreneurially, where you accept and you encourage people to fail, because failure is no longer the bad F word, where you fail and you need to cover it up and you need to move on beyond that. Failure is going to give you knowledge and information that you don't have. So we've talked of 6 such practices in the book. That we talk of curation. Today you have a large amount of data, information circulating all over. Now, how do you take and segregate the noise from the real knowledge, from the signal, as we call it? So these are the kind of things that we've talked about in the book, and it's a book that is completely jargon-free. And the intent was to write a book which, if you picked up at the airport in Mumbai, by the time you land in Bangalore, you have read the book. So it is a brief book with a lot of citations, because we wanted to be grounded in scholarly research. And it's a bunch of stories, actually, Shesh, more than any gyan. It's just stories that I enjoy reading and that I have engaged with.
So, Professor Sud, I have to ask you this, because this thing which has puzzled me. I grew up looking and admiring many old entrepreneurs of this country and globally, and who have a great story, who build wonderful large companies. When I read this book, it largely talks about the younger generation, the generation which is very actively up here, this is not very little reference made of people who built companies in the past, or which companies still have lasted. So what do you think? And at one place you talk about built to last and so on and so forth. So what is that? What is your take? Because I have always felt those companies focused on certain key thing, which was cash is the king. You must have money in the bank. Money you have to generate. You have to create a shareholder value. Today is purely about valuation. How do you see that? How do you see this? Because many of these young, new tech companies are yet to make money.
So, Ashish, I think we talked about this a little earlier too, that ultimately they're going to make money because they are being funded by the VCs. Their runway is much longer. Now, when I started a company, I had to make a profit within a year or two because I was servicing loans. Now, because you're not taking a loan, you're not taking debt, you're offering equity. And hopefully your angel and your VC, you're going to go through multiple rounds of funding. So they are intelligent people. They know where they're putting the money down. And they ultimately see you make a profit. No one intends to make a loss forever. So we use the example of Amazon. Amazon lasted 2 decades before they started making profits. And when they made profits, they were humongous. and
Right.
it is a highly profitable company today. But
Right.
the old generation companies are all reinventing themselves.
Right.
So you still need basic industries. You need steel, you need cement, you need infrastructure. But all these companies are adding a little bit to their business model that
Right.
allows them to take those small, not so risky bets and
Right.
try a few things,
Right.
which very often work.
Right. 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 So, if one were to just ask you, when you say the old companies are taking risk, but obviously measured risk, and they are trying to change it more. But when you see the new ones, you make a reference to a very important point is debt and the equity, which you talk about. And debt is a bad word right now in the parlance, because you take debt, you're servicing debt, you end up working for banks. That is the joke which goes around in the new business. And you take debt means you end up working for somebody, and to pay out. But equity, while it is a good thing to have it, it's not something very easily which comes by. And how do you see what is changing here? What is changing here in the entrepreneurial environment between old and what is happening now, and what do you think will be the future?
So I don't think it's a black and white statement that debt is bad or good and equity is bad or good. With equity, you are giving up control because you have then people on your board who will be guiding you. But there are examples of very, very successful companies. Zerodha. I had Nitin Kamath in my class recently, and he has never taken a single rupee of equity.
Right.
White Hat Junior never took anyone's money, and they finally sold within 3 years of starting. So you have a number of companies who follow the old route and say, why should we give up equity when we are on a solid business? And they grow organically. So it's a more complex discussion, which it's not a black and white issue. So I would advocate that keep taking debt as long as you can. But when you reach a threshold where you find that profitability is not there immediately, but ultimately you'll be profitable. And you need the relationships and the networks. Another thing we talk a lot about in the book is your social and professional networks. Now they are key to your success.
Right.
And when you think entrepreneurially, you think of whom we talk of using OPR, other people's resources.
Right.
So entrepreneurs leverage resources that other people own without really having them in-house, because they want to keep their the ability to pivot and keep themselves light. So it's an interesting discussion. Generally, people prefer equity because they feel it's risky. Somebody else is sharing your risk. But if you're building a company for the long run and you are convinced about its viability, many of them stay away from equity.
Right. So how does, obviously entrepreneurship was never a course earlier in the past, the times when we were growing up. It was not even talked about. It is something which you learn. What does the whole program largely focus on? Because you are a professor and you teach entrepreneurship. That's one question which I want you to talk about. Two, I also want you to tell what do you think are Indians cut out to be entrepreneurs? Does India have it? Though we have a great story which is brewing, but still we are a 1.4 billion population. And when you put it against that, the percentage is very minuscule in percentage terms. So where do you think in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, what do you think is the entrepreneur story of this country?
So I'm going to answer the second question first. Okay. In India, because of the lack of job opportunities, we have what we call necessity entrepreneurship, where people, out of pure necessity, they can't get a job, they have to be entrepreneurial. So I think entrepreneurship has a huge story, both at the tech level in big cities like Hyderabad and NCR and Bangalore, and also at a rural level where people are forced to pick up employment, or they pick up a startup which they would like to begin their journey with, purely because of the lack of jobs. On the first question, the research is very clear. While you can't teach entrepreneurship, you can create entrepreneurs by making them recognize opportunities, which is purely what we do. So we, at the IIM, for example, we know that 95% or 90% of our students are not going to be entrepreneurial from the day they graduate. Many of them have loans. They have to service those loans. They all join the institute because they're looking for good jobs.
Right.
But our alums, when they come back after 15 years of experience in the real world onto campus, the one advice they keep giving us is one necessary skill is being entrepreneurial. Now, when we push them further and say, look, guys, you didn't become entrepreneurs when you graduated. They then correct us and tell us, but 10 or 15 years down the line, we are either entrepreneurs within our own organizations, or we are advising entrepreneurs, or we have taken the entrepreneurial route. So this is a necessary life skill today. And we teach entrepreneurship not only as an outcome for a business, but to be entrepreneurial as a mindset. And recognize that behind every challenge, behind every irritation, is an opportunity that you can convert into a business. So we are not only encouraging people to start businesses, but we encourage them to behave like entrepreneurs with their careers. Today, we have music majors and literature students and students with computer science coming into our classes at Ashoka. At the IIM, we are actively looking at liberal arts students whom we take on. Because that doctor, that English major is adding value to a case discussion. So we are broadening our net, and we are teaching entrepreneurship as a skill, as a life skill, which you will need 10, 15 years down the line.
Professor Sud, you talk about resources, you talk about network. I just out of sheer, my question to you is, what is the role of a family in an entrepreneur's life? How important and relevant it is? Because a lot of people they get many things right, but then at the home front, they hit a roadblock, in spite of the fact that they have capabilities or the skills or whatever you might call it. What is
interesting that you ask this question, because I start my course at the IIM and at Ashoka teaching a case called Akhil and Rupa. And it's an interesting case. Akhil is from BMS College in Bangalore. He has gone and done his master's at MIT. He joined a startup and the startup collapsed. So he then goes to Harvard for an MBA. And in between, he gets that junoon to start a company. And he's engaged to Rupa. And Rupa is in a hurry for him to pick up a job. And the case shows how, because Rupa was not fully on board, the business did not take off. And I think it's very important to have your spouse, if not your entire family, with you, because it's going to be a rough journey. And we often tell our students that when they found a company, in the first 5 years, they'll be spending more time with their founders, with their co-founders, than with their own spouses. So you need to have your spouse at least completely on board. And it helps a lot if your spouse is also a breadwinner for the family. So while you take those short and medium-term risks, the family continues to have a steady income. So you need to mix and marry, and you shouldn't be in a hurry to start a business till you have checked all those boxes.
Professor, what has been your biggest success? What do you think which you feel very proud of in this journey of your 30 years of, through the academics and through the, the working entrepreneur career journey?
I look at it in installments. The urge to do a PhD was eating me away till one day my wife said, either shut up and stop talking about it or go and do it. So completing that over a 4-year span, I got a lot of satisfaction from that. The other thing is I've always had this creative urge to write. And I write short fiction, but I never had the courage to publish it and take it out. So I took the halfway path where we wrote this book that we just talked about, which has stories and anecdotes. And the fact that within 2 or 3 months of publication, they're going in for a reprint. I had given myself 1 year before it would really go back into circulation. It has been well received in the market, and I'm very proud of that. And again, we mentioned right in the start of the book that the book is dedicated to our students who teach us something every single day. So I think you need the intellectual humility to realize that it's not just your effort. It's all the students who have engaged with you, your family, your friends, just like you. I remember going to parties and saying that I can't have a drink and I have to get back to the hostel before midnight because there's a test the next day. So it's been they say it takes a village to rear a child. I think it takes a good network and sincere friends and family and my children who helped me do these things. So I shouldn't take too much credit myself. It's a team actually that does it.
Right, right. And just something which is, and every successful man has a little chink in the armor, what they say. If you were to pin down any failures which you could talk about and your learnings from it, what was the failure? And if you would like to talk about it, I'm not going to push you on that. If you would like to talk any failure which you think was a game changer, it taught you something, and if it was, what it was.
Yeah, so when I was looking at an MBA, then the age went by because I was an entrepreneur and I could no longer look for an MBA. I applied for a PhD program, and
Right.
I was very serious about it, and I got into Harvard for a
Right.
PhD, and I could not do it. And I think that was something that I should have been a little more aggressive about. I couldn't carry my family, basically. And the business was still running. It was thriving. And they were not keen that I just change a career. But then I learned something from it. And that was that if I have to do it, I have to accept the limitation that I can't move out of Bangalore. The business will have to continue running for some time till an exit comes up. And that's when I started taking the CAT, the Common Entrance Test for the IIM. And I did that 2 or 3 times before I could finally clear the CAT exam. And I learned from the fact that I didn't do the PhD at Harvard to say, let me do what I can with the resources I have. And I then joined the program at Bangalore. So that was a huge learning, that when you aim very high and you don't succeed, then take what you can with what you have.
Yeah, become real about, and then
yes.
Yeah. So, well, Professor Sud, I want to really thank you. This is a wonderful book, and I'm very sure that our viewers are going to love this. Now, my question related to this is, are you writing a sequel to this? Which is the next book which is you're working on?
No, nothing right now. I want to get back to my short fiction, short stories, which is something that I've nurtured. I did a course in an MFA on writing.
What is NFA?
MFA, Master of Fine Arts in writing. When I was in the US, we were in the US for 9 years, and an MFA was offered by the university I worked with. So I did the course. And ever since then, I've been a closeted writer. So this is halfway to going out there and putting your work. And it's a very scary feeling. In fact, my co-author threatened me at one stage that if I continue going the way I am, the book will never see the light of day and will just sit on a computer. So finally, he goaded me into publishing it. And I was very fearful because, it's a sensitive thing. You've put in a lot of effort into writing it. Me and my co-author did that. And you are sensitive to criticism. But fortunately, it has worked out well. So I've enjoyed the journey, bouncing ideas with my co-author, with friends like you, seeing whether, and students, of course, who were very, very aggressive in saying this has a tremendous amount of value. We used to share maybe a chapter with a student, and they would go say, Professor, you're crazy not to put this out there. Put it out there. There may be some criticism, but be thick-skinned enough to accept it, but take the highs with the lows. So it has worked out well. And I don't see myself writing a sequel in a hurry, but never say no. Or never say never to anything. So let's see how it plays out.
Knowing you with the kind of energy you have and the kind of passion you have, I'm very sure there is not just a sequel. There will be a few things you will work on, and I think it will possibly. I think we are just blessed to have people like you who have that energy, who have that positive attitude, and who constantly are who go out and learn and bring that learning and bring it to the larger audience. Fantastic.
Shesh, you're being very kind. You're being very kind the way you're talking, but it's not people like me. It's the conversations that people like me have with people like you, with our students, with our friends. Those are the conversations that trigger something off. And you feel that, look, at individual level, we understand this. But why are we not propagating this to our young students and telling them, and people, mid-career people? And I mean, the last chapter is all about people, we call it late bloomers. And, we wrote it as a conclusion to the book. It's just 4 pages. And the interesting part is that the press, when they're given a copy of the book and they want to publish a little bit of it, ask permission for the late bloomers. So even people in their 40s and 50s and even later, like I am, see the possibility of making a change. And we've given example after example, Indian examples of late bloomers who have succeeded very well.
So no, I think it's something which is very interesting. And I think we were looking forward to, we could just go on talking about this. We're a little running out of time, but I want to thank you for your time and sharing your knowledge with us. We're looking forward to your other books, and we'll come back and reconnect with you and talk a little more on and deep dive into a few topics which we think or you think we should talk about. And then I think we will dwell on that. So Professor Sud, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate this, and all the very best with years ahead.
Thank you, Shesh. It was a great opportunity you gave me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Likewise, yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.